Hello and welcome to the Galactic Archives, home of any and all information you may want or need. Today our story is about one of the worst horrors to befall the galaxy, the Yuuzhan Vong. The Yuuzhan Vong, similar to the canon's Grisk, were a race of beings that Grand Admiral Thrawn feared and worked tirelessly to defend against. However, unlike the Grisk, the Vong were immune to Force sense and could only be affected by Force powers that weren't directed at their minds, such as Force lightning or dropping a rock on their head. Also unlike the Grisk, the Vong were an intergalactic terror, and they ended up... The reason for that is that a war between two robotic species destroyed their homeworld and their galaxy. Then they ended up just going out through all the galaxies they could and wiped them clean of populations, essentially. Much very similar to the way Darth Nihilus tried to wipe the galaxy clean, because he was the Great Hunger. The first mention of the Vong was in the book The Outbound Flight by Timothy Zahn, in which Commander Thrawn destroys a transport containing 6 Jedi Masters and dozens of Jedi Knights and Padawans, as well as civilians. Because his goals and Palpatine's goals kind of had this same outcome. If the Outbound Flight left the galaxy, there were Jedi that Sidious couldn't kill, and they might return one day and foil his plans. And the craft leaving the galaxy might attract the attention of the Vong, which, as I said, were an intergalactic terror, so they were all over the place. So Thrawn destroyed the Outbound Flight before it got a chance to leave the galaxy. After that, there isn't much about the Vong between the Outbound Flight and the New Jedi Order. At which point, when they attacked Grandmaster Luke Skywalker and his order, would have to fight off the Yuuzhan Vong, together with the Galactic Alliance, which was the combination of the New Republic and most of the Imperial Remnant. They were led by an ex-Imperial. So, I don't know. It certainly is an interesting topic, but it's a topic for another day. Slowly, the Vong they attacked the galaxy and slowly made their way to the heart of the galaxy, taking over Coruscant, completely eradicating anyone who did not escape Coruscant and turning it into their new homeworld. They were pushing through until they reached Pelian's Imperial Remnant, which had stayed up until this point. They had peace with the Galactic Alliance, and they had an ambassador with the Galactic Alliance and back and forth and all this and that, but it still was an Imperial Remnant and was separate from the Galactic Alliance, but they had peace, so there was that. Pelian's Empire successfully defeated the Yuuzhan Vong, and then they were slowly pushed back, though they didn't win many a battle, but the Galactic Alliance and Pelian's Empire together successfully pushed them back and then forced them to surrender, at which point they restored Coruscant to what it was previously, the massive city planet, and then they eventually just lived peacefully with everyone else in the galaxy. There isn't really... I could go into more detail about the war and about their lifestyle that was learned about after the war, but there is just so much to cover, and it really doesn't quite pertain as much to the topic of this story, which is the threat that they are to the galaxy. They really, when they arrived in the galaxy, it wasn't realized that what they were or what they could do until the Jedi went to fight them and realized that they just couldn't sense them at all. Until Anakin Solo, the third child of Leia Organa Solo and Han Solo, found one of the crystals that the Vong carried with them after killing a Vong through using his lightsaber. He rebuilt his lightsaber using that crystal and formed essentially a force bond to it, and he could sense the Yuuzhan Vong because of his attuned senses to them. There were, I believe that there were no Vong force sensors except for their leader, and that's how he became their leader. He still was immune to being sensed through the Force, but obviously Anakin Solo could sense them, and there were a couple others, including Jason Solo, who eventually gained the ability to sense the Vong. Overall, the Vong, they traveled on massive planet-sized bioships, or organic ships, that were living. And they would just go around on these massive ships that were essentially just artificial planets, and they would just wipe out peoples, groups, and species. And the fact that they managed to work their way through the unknown regions, bypassing the Chiss ascendancy and destroying many of their military forces, and then beating back the Galactic Alliance until they worked with Pelian's Imperial Remnant, and then there wasn't any mention of it, but I imagine that the Chiss survivors also, any survivors of the Chiss extermination, because I imagine they were exterminated as well, though there's no record of it anywhere. But then again, there's no real record of the Chiss anywhere either, other than Grand Admiral Thrawn. But I imagine that the Chiss survivors were working with Pelian's Imperial Remnant and the Galactic Alliance to defeat the Yuuzhan Vong, and that's what caused the Vong to have to backpedal before they eventually surrendered. So their canon version, as I mentioned, the Grisk, they first appeared in Timothy Zahn's 2018 canon novel, Thrawn Alliances. If you've read it, you'll remember the portion about Jedi General Anakin Skywalker meeting Commander Thrawn in the Unknown Regions. They were the race that told Dooku about cortosis and where to find it. And for those of you who don't know, cortosis is a metal similar to Beskar that can be used to completely deflect lightsabers. The only difference is, depending on the purity of the cortosis, pure cortosis, as seen in the Legacy comics by Dark Horse, was able to deactivate a lightsaber, as was shown by Roan Fel, and during his empire. The cortosis used, they were manufacturing B3 cortosis battle droids, which are essentially just B2 battle droids with cortosis armor on the outside instead of normal Durasteel. And then later, Thrawn and Vader were working together on an investigation, and two Grisk, heavy cruisers, drop out of hyperspace and kind of just sat there until the Imperials made a move towards them. And they just kind of jumped away after that. And there's no real mention of the Grisk other than that so far. So that's all I have about the Yuuzhan Vong and the Grisk. Please let me know in the comments what you think will happen in canon with the Grisk now that Thrawn has returned from Peridia, because they are the threat that he wishes to combat. If you have any corrections or concerns about the Legends information that I presented, please let me know in the comments. And please return any time for another delve into the archives. It's always a pleasure to share our knowledge with you.